ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey, everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese. Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Mount Lao Taoist. In our county, there was a scholar surnamed Wang. Let's call him Wang Sheng for now. Wang Sheng was the seventh child in his family, and his ancestors were once a prestigious and prominent lineage. From a young age, Wang Sheng admired the Taoist arts and heard that there were many immortals on Mount Lao, so he prepared his belongings and set off to Mount Lao to learn about the Tao. After traveling for many days, Wang Sheng finally arrived at Mount Lao and reached the summit. Upon reaching the top, he saw a Taoist temple that exuded an air of tranquility. As he approached the temple, he noticed a Taoist priest sitting cross-legged on a cushion. The priest had long white hair cascading down his neck and a dignified and carefree demeanor. Wang Sheng approached and engaged the priest in conversation, finding the priest's words to be profound and mysterious. He then requested to become the priest's disciple. The Taoist priest replied, "I'm concerned that you've grown accustomed to a comfortable life, and won't be able to endure the hardships of learning our techniques." Wang Sheng answered, "Please believe me, I can endure hardships." The Taoist reluctantly agreed. The Taoist had many disciples, and in the evenings, they all gathered in the temple. After bowing to each of them, Wang Sheng stayed in the temple and became one of the Taoist's disciples. The next day, just before dawn, the Taoist called Wang Sheng and handed him an axe, asking him to join the others in chopping firewood. Wang Sheng carefully followed the Taoist's instructions. And so, over the course of more than a month, Wang Sheng's hands and feet developed thick calluses from the laborious work. The daily toil began to take its toll, and he gradually started to find the hardship unbearable. Secretly, he began to contemplate returning home. One evening, after collecting firewood, Wang Sheng returned to find two guests sitting with his master, drinking. By now, the sky had turned dark, and the Taoist temple remained unlit. The master, however, took a piece of paper that shone as brightly as a mirror and pasted it on the wall. In a short while, the paper transformed into a brilliant moon, illuminating the entire room. Instantly, the whole temple was bathed in light, and even the tiniest hair was visible. The disciples surrounded the Taoist, bustling around and serving. One of the guests addressed everyone, saying, "Such a beautiful night should be shared by all." He picked up a wine jug and poured out wine for the disciples, instructing them to enjoy themselves thoroughly. Wang Sheng wondered how a small jug of wine could satisfy the many people present. As the guests used various cups and containers to pour, they seemed to compete, fearing the jug would empty. However, no matter how much they poured out, the wine in the jug showed no signs of diminishing. This amazed Wang Sheng greatly. After a while, one guest said to the Taoist, "Although you have generously provided us with the moon's light, drinking in silence like this is rather dull. Why don't we summon Chang'e, the moon goddess, here as well?" With that, he threw a pair of chopsticks toward the moon, and suddenly a beautiful lady emerged from the moonlight. Initially, she was less than a foot tall, but as she descended to the ground, she transformed into a normal-sized woman. She had a slim waist and a graceful neck, and she began performing the rainbow skirt and feathered coat dance. After the dance, she started singing. Dancing gracefully, come back quickly. Why did you confine me to the Guanghan Palace? Her singing was clear and melodious, resembling the sound of a flute. After her song, Chang'e hovered and floated up, eventually landing on the table. Just as everyone watched her in astonishment, she turned back into a pair of chopsticks. The Taoist and the guests burst into laughter together. Another guest said, "Tonight has been delightful, but I truly can't drink anymore. How about we move the feast to the Moon Palace? Wouldn't that be even more entertaining?" With that, the Taoist and the guests brought the feast into the moon, and the disciples watched them sit and drink in the Moon Palace. They could see every detail of the Taoist and the guests as if they were reflected in a mirror. After a while, the moon began to fade. The disciples lit candles and saw only the Taoist sitting alone in the room. The guests had vanished. The dishes and fruits were still on the table, and the moon on the wall was nothing more than a circular piece of shining paper. The Taoist asked, "Have the disciples had enough to drink?" They all replied in unison, "Yes, we've had enough." The Taoist smiled and said, "If you've had enough, then go to bed early. Don't delay tomorrow's wood chopping." The disciples agreed and dispersed. Wang Sheng was both amazed and envious, and his thought of returning home vanished completely. Another month passed, and Wang Sheng couldn't bear the hardships any longer. However, the Taoist still hadn't taught him a single spell. Wang Sheng no longer wanted to wait and bid farewell to the Taoist. He said to him, "Master, I traveled hundreds of miles to learn Taoist arts from you. Even if I can't learn advanced spells like immortality, I would be satisfied with learning even a small technique to quench my thirst for knowledge. It's been 2 or 3 months, and every day, I'm just chopping wood in the morning and coming back at night, stuck in this monotonous labor. I've never endured such hardships back home." The Taoist chuckled and said, "I already suspected you couldn't handle the hardships of learning Tao. Now it seems I was right. Tomorrow morning, you can return." Wang Sheng pleaded, "Master, I've toiled here for many days. Please, teach me a small skill before I leave. I don't want this journey to be in vain." The Taoist asked, "What kind of technique do you want to learn?" Wang Sheng replied, "I've often seen you walk through walls. If I could learn that skill, I would be content." The Taoist agreed with a smile. So, the Taoist taught him the incantation for passing through walls and asked him to silently recite it. After Wang Sheng recited the incantation, the Taoist beckoned him and said, "Go inside." Facing the wall, Wang Sheng hesitated to enter. The Taoist said, "Try walking into the wall." Wang Sheng cautiously walked forward. He reached the wall but found himself blocked by it. The Taoist advised, "Lower your head and walk quickly into the wall, don't hesitate." Wang Sheng summoned his courage, and a few steps away from the wall, he rushed forward into it. He felt like there was nothing in front of him, but when he turned to look, he realized he had passed through the wall. Filled with amazement, Wang Sheng thanked the Taoist once again. The Taoist said, "When you return home, you must lead an honest and humble life, otherwise, this skill won't work." With that, the Taoist provided Wang Sheng with travel expenses to return home. After returning home, Wang Sheng boasted to his wife, claiming that he had met an immortal and learned magical spells. Now, he believed nothing, not even the strongest walls, could stop him. Naturally, his wife didn't believe a word of his story. So, Wang Sheng attempted to replicate his previous action, running towards the wall a few feet away. Unexpectedly, he slammed into the solid wall, bounced back, and fell to the ground, his forehead swelling like a giant egg. His wife helped him up, but instead of sympathy, she ridiculed him. Wang Sheng felt ashamed and infuriated. He cursed the old Taoist for not being a good person. The story concludes with the author's commentary, noting that people who hear this tale may laugh at Wang Sheng, yet there are many individuals like him in the world. The author criticizes those who, like Wang Sheng, only focus on negative aspects, neglecting positive remedies. He warns against falling into the trap of relying solely on dubious methods, likening it to preferring disease or poison over proper treatment. Some people, he explains, are surrounded by flatterers who encourage them to believe that once they possess such techniques, they can dominate the world without resistance. Initially, these fools may experience some success, leading them to think they are invincible. However, he emphasizes that such foolishness eventually leads to inevitable failure and hardship, akin to continually crashing into a solid wall until they are battered and bruised. All right. That's all for today's ghostly tale. Mount Lao Taoist. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.